Hello and welcome back to The Dive. I'm Jat, joined by Kobe, Azael, and our very special guest, Froskurinn.
The most special.
This is the eve of the 2018 Worlds Quarterfinals, one that has the potential for a C9 victory and a Fnatic victory, which would lead to a Fnatic C9 semifinal, which would lead
the West, baby,
to a
let's
Western
go!
final. That's how we get ahead of ourselves.
Honestly, yeah, but the draw, you're talking about the draw already, the quarterfinal draw. I don't think there's been a more hype quarterfinal draw for Western fans ever, actually.
Yeah.
This is for sure it, right?
I just think it's the most exciting Worlds period for Western fans ever, right? You know, with how competitive a lot of the teams have been, like, you know, from both regions, we've had extremely exciting games. When you look at the draw we got in combination with that,
the
how
meta,
Fnatic looks,
everybody's
the meta
loving it.
hype, like Worlds has been really, really great, I think, overall, and especially for Western fans.
I think the only time that you can maybe push back a little bit is the Origin Fnatic
Totally
Worlds.
fair.
But
Yep.
otherwise, I mean, there's more success across the board in terms of like Cloud9 being involved in that conversation and how dominant Fnatic looks.
This time, NA fans get to be involved. So.
Yeah, that was the EU. This is the West. This is the
Also,
West.
when Worlds was in EU that year, that EU got two teams to the semifinals. Like, imagine if Origin and Fnatic would have been on the same side of the bracket.
Yeah,
I feel like
that's the added hype.
That's the added hype,
Yeah.
right? Because we have a Freak of Freaks, who even though they are a Korean team, was 4-2, lost their first two games, still the slowest team really that made it to the quarterfinals, it feels like. So there is a belief for some that Cloud9 can win that. Fnatic had a better group stage than any Western team ever, with a 6-1 record and 2 defeats of IG on the final day. They're going up against EDG, the number 3 seed from China. So it's like, that is 2015 plus because they're on the same side of the bracket. But let's actually talk about that side of the bracket right off the bat. We'll start with the top left, which is C9 versus Freak of Freaks. And then while talking about this matchup, reference some of the takings and findings we had from the group stage. So, Frosk, we can start with you.
Just
a quick question, or anyone who
straight out of
wants
the
to
gate.
start. Just thoughts on, let's go over C9 first, like their run that they made on the final day and then their chances in the quarterfinals.
I mean, the reality is this is probably if you were going to draw a first seed, this is the one that you wanted to get. So from that lens, Cloud9 are like, okay, we got theoretically the weakest team of the first seed, so we have the best chance to go through. And then you start breaking down and looking at play styles. For me, the thing about Cloud9 is talking with you guys, watching their games. It's always that, you know, under those clutch, really important moments, people like Jensen seem to disappear instead of stepping forward. And it felt like finally Cloud9 fans were redeemed and had all of their faith rewarded in Jensen, because he pulled out the Zillion pick. Licorice was going crazy up in the top lane. And even Zazel, for me especially, had ridiculous games on Thresh and Alistar to really put Cloud9 over the edge. And so collectively, I'm like, does lightning strike twice? Like, how often are we going to get this form? Was this Cloud9 overperforming, or was this them finally meeting expectations? And that's just something that I don't have enough experience with this roster to really gauge.
I think that's one of the big questions right now, because watching Cloud9's second round robin, like the last day of Group B, was so exciting for North American fans, for any fans of Cloud9. They had such big improvements. Sneaky was so much better in lane. That was one of the big worries, was early on, like, he got super blasted by Uzi, as well as some of the other bottom lanes. So that was a really big improvement. Him and Jensen both played a lot better. I think the shining star has definitely been Licorice as far as consistency for Cloud9. And that's so big because he's one of the rookies. And if I just look at the most recent, that last day of Group B, and I put that side by side with a Freak of Freaks, I think it's a very good matchup for Cloud9. Not only, as Froskurinn was talking about, Afrika being kind of overall less powerful for a seed 1, but they had by far the lowest kills per minute of any of the teams at Worlds this year. 0.4, playing pretty slow, and then mostly just getting kills and stuff in team fights. Whereas Cloud9, especially on the last day, that was super good early game. They were coming out with counter picks, winning lanes all over the place, fighting skirmishes. So that was my first kind of reaction to this matchup, was C9 going to try and do some, early win lane stuff. A lot of counter picks coming out, and That would probably be the main tactic.
And that's the most important thing, I think, when looking at this matchup. It's identifying the correct power level for Afrika. So we basically had like two different metas between the groups. You had Group B, which was like fast and furious. Everyone's playing early game. Everyone decides to throw down the gauntlet, have these crazy picks, or decide, like, even Uzi was like, forget the Kaisa. I need to win lane phase because it's just like the games are being decided here. Afrika went completely the opposite way, as did a lot of Group A. It was more about post-lane phase, playing very slow, very controlled style. And so you have these very different styles that are going to clash. And for once, Afrika feels like pound for pound talent, like especially when you look at Tucson and Kramer. Tucson did have a better performance on the second half of the round robin, but individually speaking, I don't think they outclass the Western players. And it used to be that, the LPL teams, the LCK teams, they go, and not only are they smarter, but individually they were just stronger across the board. And that doesn't seem true anymore.
Yeah, I think it's really a good sign for them if the bottom lane of Afrika isn't able to actually get massive leads, because despite the fact that C9's bottom lane still did do a lot better in the second round robin. I mean, Siki was still averaging 500 gold down at 15, but their bottom lane as a whole in the first set of games was averaging down over 1600 gold at 15. So they were getting slammed, and I mean a lot of that is in part to the first RNG game where they just hard lost off bot lane. But even in the second round robin, they were still generally, Sneaky was still generally behind, but it was manageable amounts. It was, in lanes where he could scale into the late game, and they were playing very well, I think, around kind of covering them. Like we saw that Svenskeren spent more time trying to protect bot lane, trying to keep bot lane relevant than he did around topside. The first round robin was kind of more about protecting topside. So I do have some faith that, if they are not going to be, dominated in lane and they can stay relevant, that the solo lanes of C9 at this like current level that they have been showing certainly can, take over a game, or certainly have the potential to. But we also have to remember how much better I've always felt Afrika looked in playoffs and best ofs, because when people talk about this team, they talk so much about their preparation, the fact that they, do so much internal scrimming, that they hide picks, that they prepare counter strategies for teams. And that's something that could theoretically be pretty powerful against Cloud9, who has a lot of unique picks. If you pre-plan a counter strategy for Zillion or Kindred or Kaisa, which Sneaky loves to play, there's these picks that they want to go for. And if they can plan around that and prepare counters, that could look good for Afrika in a best of 5.
Two biggest disappointments for Afrika for me at Worlds this year has been their planning. I thought it was actually garbage as far as what they showed for their planning coming
Definitely
into
agree.
groups
And
for
a bad meta read.
for the group teams. And Keen, what the heck? This dude, again, we're supposed to have an all-star Korean top laner, similar to, Longju and Khan. He's supposed to be the second coming up here. He was playing Quinn. He blasted people individually in the LCK.
At least we still got the shy.
And now he's up there missing sign ultimates into the wall, and I don't even know what's going on over here. That was supposed to be a star player.
Part of it, I think, was down to a bad meta read. Like they actually said when they picked Akali into Urgot, they're like, it's so we can set up that 4-1.
This works, right?
And then Urgot built a bunch of MR, and they're like, I guess that doesn't work. I guess you can't 4-1 with that, which is really, that was really strange to me, if that excuse was actually true. But I would say the way he played on the final day of group stage, when they played 3 games in a row and won all 3, even though some of those games were close, I thought Keen was very reliable in those games. Like, not any kills, not any deaths, like 2 assists, but he would just get turret damage and get pressure.
And
It's Jack's game especially, I thought.
Yeah, and it's really important to understand that with Keen, he's not the type of top laner that absorbs a ton of resources. Like, he doesn't need the jungler to come camp his lane, and it's not how Afrika play around him. He's there to create his own advantages, which then unlocks the rest of Afrika, that they can choose, kind of like pick where they're going to give their resources on the rest of the map, which is incredibly important for Kramer and Tucson, because they're going to need a lot of assistance. Majority of teams have been playing through the bot lane. We see a ton of priority pick around the support and the bot lane picks. So if Keen is able to have a decent matchup against Licorice, either then just neutralize it or survive it, who is probably like the best, like you said, most consistent member of Cloud9, then hopefully for Afrika fans, that frees up their jungler and frees up Kuro, so they can start giving more support around different areas of the map and try to break elsewhere.
And here's a question. Both these teams started the round robin at 1-2 and then went 3-0 on the second day. Cloud9 then lost the tiebreaker to RNG to make it 3-1, but essentially they had a bad week and then a really good day. So do you have any, like, what is your read on which team's 3-0 is more likely to be repeated in the quarterfinals, because there's a fear for me that Cloud9 had a good day, or that Afrika just had a good day. Like, which team do you expect to be able to replicate that day in the quarterfinals more?
So with the way that I've been setting it up, I do feel more for Cloud9. Part of that is due to the opponents. And part of the reason we were freaking out so much about the last day of Group B is this was RNG and Gen G that they were doing it against. However, Gen G seemed to have a complete collapse internally. And their games, especially at the end of the day, just looked like they were limping through them. Exactly. They were not making really any proactive moves or setting much up. So maybe that does take away from it a little bit. But the fact that Cloud9 did that, versus RNG, who have been, a very good bottom lane focus, team fights later as well. And that's kind of what Afrika shifted to get their best, 3 wins in a row as well. More team fighting, Kramer playing a lot better, and carrying those made me feel that way. I am trying to look at it objectively and overcorrect maybe for it being Cloud9 and getting excited, because coming into the tournament the expectations were not that high for them. And that may take a little bit more sorting, but that was my initial reaction.
I'd also say, even just how Vitality played. So while Gen G, you could say, certainly underperformed.
Yeah, true.
Vitality overperformed, I think, and played incredibly well. So when I was watching that group, I felt like that was just a higher level group than Afrika's group, right? And I think most of the casters, when we were talking, were like, okay, the way that Vitality played, they probably could have got out of another group. Cloud9 might have been able to get out of another group. RNG certainly could have, right? Like, it looked like all of those teams were playing incredibly well. And Gen G didn't look great. Maybe their opponents just played incredible and punished them. Maybe they were tilted or they played poorly. Who knows? But it felt like, Flash Wolves, Fengvu, and G2, I think, were not playing as well as, RNG and Vitality and these teams, right? So it is always tough to know, but I do have faith that Cloud9, I think, as long as they do not just kind of get like checkmated in pick ban, which there is maybe a chance of Afrika really saying, okay, it's about the Zillion, it's about the Shen, and it's about whatever else. And then, like, if you take away key picks, then maybe Cloud9 looks worse, because I felt like Shen Flex was incredibly important. The Zillion was incredibly important. And then the last one, I think, is like more up for debate where you go. Maybe you just have to take away a power pick, and it depends on the side of the matchup. But those 2 picks felt so big for me. So if Cloud9 never gets those in the series, I'm like, ooh, do they look as good? I'm not sure.
I think you bring up a good point as far as I want to give a lot of credit to Reaper. Because Reaper has especially been one of these coaches, even last Worlds, where there were a lot of these unique jungle picks where he was just like, contracts, you played a couple games of Graves, right? Is strong, right? Okay, get in there.
Get in there.
And play some hard carry jungle. The Hecarim is another really good example. Licorice talked about in his interview afterward. It was literally 2 days before they pulled out in a gauntlet game to qualify for Worlds as this, Aatrox counter that he likes. He just scrimmed it a couple times, 1v1ing with Golden Glue or something.
Darshan.
I think he said maybe Darshan. Yeah. And then Reaper's willing to, put these types of picks in there. He has a lot of faith in his players and their knowledge and their, feeling of comfort in matchups like that, which I really do like. And I think gives them an edge as far as we keep talking about the Afrika coaches who also have a similar reputation. And so far, I think it's Reaper won, all of the Afrika coaches as far as the start to their group was definitely kind of a middling performance.
One thing I'm hearing a lot is the word faith.
I didn't say faith one time.
You did. You can check the tapes. So did Zale.
No one
I've
has ever
said
checked
it.
tapes before.
Yeah,
So.
I'm not sure if Froskurinn. I have some
It's
synonyms.
lost in the ether.
We can say you have belief, confidence,
I never
hope,
doubted them.
allegiance. You can be assured.
If I did say it, it's probably only one
It is
time.
definite allegiance. No, I just think that I think it's the idea of like consistency versus like evolution. I'm really glad that you brought up Reaper because I was just about to grab onto it. It's like 2 very similar competing storylines of this idea of like discipline, training, your 80s montage, like rocky moment for both Cloud9 and Afrika. This was one of the better splits that Afrika had ever had, but usually they kind of sit around like mid-tier LCK, a little bit like just almost out of the topic of relevant discussion in terms of like top 3, top 4. And their coach is always like disciplining them. When you watch them on the map, they're a very controlled team. It feels like once the dominoes start setting up that they're just like, okay, our coach told us now we go here, now we go here, now we go here. It's very like formula. And then Cloud9, you have, okay, bench everyone, reset it. We're going to build the entire org back up. And so if it's a question of, is this Cloud9 just having a really good day, or is this Cloud9 actually turning the page, like actually evolving? And I think there's evidence for almost both. I definitely think it's a really interesting conversation, and I don't know if I believe one way or the other, like, yes, this is now the new form of Cloud9. But if you actually do go back and watch their domestic split, watch them in the playoff gauntlet, watch them over the course of Worlds, there is signs of they're able to learn, they're able to adapt, and then they actually do get better. That they constantly are almost like moving up this ladder rung. And I think a part of that is due to the inexperience on their roster, because you have so much to build in like these rookies, and then when they start shining, because frankly, we don't know what the ceiling cap is for Zeyzal and Blabber. You don't know how far they're going to pop off.
Licorice as well. I mean, I don't think
We know what the cap is for Licorice. World-class top laner.
Yeah, and
maybe it's even better.
I think C9 has a really good mix of rookie talent with experienced players. And I think Svenskerin's solid play throughout that day was incredibly important. But I do also want to spend a little bit more time on Afrika, because we have a lot of C9 confidence, conviction, hope, and loyalty on this desk. So let's talk a little bit about Afrika. And this is one thing I want to point out. Even though you can look at Afrika and say, hey, Kramer and Tucson aren't that strong, so they're not going to be able to punish C9's bottom lane laning phase, or Keen is going to match up great with Licorice, which is going to hurt Afrika's win condition. There's also, I think, the other fact that I think C9, especially in that last RNG game, and a lot during the regular season, did have struggles closing games.
Yeah.
Their Baron forces are not that clean. They usually just mob a fight around the Baron pit and then take it afterwards. And as far as if Afrika get into this slow 4-1 game, that they are very good at stalling out, I think that could be where C9 stumbles. Like, even if they play great in the laning phase and they get to 30 minutes with like a 2,000 gold lead, that's actually where my concern lies with C9, and I think that's where Afrika could be strongest.
I think interesting, like these teams are kind of almost stacked their power in the same spaces. You have like two top laners that should be popping off, Keen versus Licorice, and then you have Jensen versus Kuro. I actually think Kuro, other than UCal, was the strongest representative, or one of the strongest mid laners that we had. Definitely underrated, and I think a lot of that was the competing talent in his group. But he did have Maple and Perks for like one good day and was able to hold his own. Problem with Kuro is he sometimes has bad reads on situations, and sometimes he'll just die just because you're like, oh, great. And then you have, a weaker laning bot lane. Sneaky and Zeyzal, while they did step up their laning on the second half, they're not necessarily the strongest laners. And so for me, it's actually looking at the jungle and the fact that you have Svenskeren and Bladder, and then you have Spirit and Mowgli. And we saw vastly different forms of both these teams depending on who was actually starting for the jungle. And obviously there's a lot of strategy that goes around it. But I actually think putting a magnifying glass over that element and how it really dramatically changes, because that should be the swing of, who prioritized the matchup, who's playing aggro jungler, who's able to, because like if Spirit's able to control the game, play the Nocturne, and actually get a free farm to level 6, like that's how Afrika looks so controlled. But if Blabber or Svenskeren just wants to get in there, they prioritize the 2v2 mid jungle matchup and then just start hard invading, I actually think Afrika really fall apart. But they do have a really strong defense. Like, Spirit is such a good pathing jungler that it's very dangerous to do so. But I feel like people will look at this matchup and say, just give Licorice all the power picks and go toe-to-toe with Keen. I'm like, no. I actually think this is won and lost in the jungle, even before, lane phase really ends or we get to late game.
I mean, I'd also say I just think that like how Kuro plays is so important for the team. Like when I think back to their playoff performances that really impressed me, like when they super slammed Genji 2-0, they beat Kingzone 3-1, I believe. And Kuro played really well in both of those series, and I feel like he has looked very average at Worlds. He has not really been playing up to his best. So, while we do talk about, okay, well, did Cloud9, are they playing at their level or above their level or whatever? I think whether or not Afrika is playing at their general level, Kuro has certainly been playing below my expectations for him. Coming out of playoffs, I thought that he was someone who had been looking very good. We have not seen like a lot of crazy picks or anything from him either. Like this is a guy that has brought out a lot of interesting stuff before. He brought out like Lethality Varus mid and Yasuo mid. He's known for the Vel'Koz and all these picks. And these are picks that I think situationally can be really, really strong, which again does lend itself to a best of 5, to preparing when you're going to play what against Jensen's pool. So I think, Kuro, if he plays like he did in the LCK playoffs, it'll be much harder for Cloud9. Jensen certainly, can be up to the task, but I really think so much of this series comes down to pick and ban, because when I look back also last year to the WE series where Cloud9 was 1 game from semifinals, they lost 3-2. That was a lot off of innovation from Reaper, and I wonder, are they going to have more new picks, or have they shown like everything, right? Like you talked about Hecarim coming out a couple days before the gauntlet. Do they have those other picks that free up some of the power picks we've already seen so far to really kind of throw Afrika off? If not, I think it gets a lot harder, because I do expect Kuro to look better. I do expect him to have counter picks on the red side as answers to some of Jensen's most popular champions.
I also, as much like there's a reason why when at the very beginning I was like the 2 most things I was disappointed in Afrika at Worlds this year were the coaches and Keen. There's a reason, because I had a very high bar for both of those things, and I still think that Keen is extremely strong top laner.
Right.
So if we're expecting kind of the beginning of groups type of performance from him, I still think in a best of 5 he'll have a much better performance than that. So that is going to be something to worry about. And he used things like the Quinn as recent as their playoff game versus Griffin, right?
Yep.
And that was one of the games that they did win against Griffin. Afrika can still do a lot more of these types of options. And in the best of 5, we'll probably get to see that.
Yeah.
It's just that with the recent performances from these 2 teams, that's why it kind of gave it so much more to the side of Cloud9 than you would have thought coming into Worlds. Right?
Definitely.
Let's do predictions.
All right.
One thing I like about this year when I'm looking at the bracket is I feel like there aren't any imposters in the quarterfinals. Like,
Totally.
I think last year, even though Fnatic made a great run after the 2-4 start, I'm like, come on, like they started 0-4 and now they're in the quarterfinals. But all of these teams, I feel like, showed a couple of games that were in a really high level. I think the other fact that there were no 6-0 teams in the group stage meant every group was actually very competitive. So that to me will lead to, I hope, closer quarterfinal games, just as a preface for all the predictions we're going to do today. But what do you got? C9 versus Afrika. Anyone can start.
I think that regardless of who you're picking for the victory here, I think there are going to be a lot of games in this series because I have so much, hold these coaches for both sides in high esteem. I think that there will be changes from both sides after each loss, right? I don't see people, running straight back, losing the same way over and over, right? Like going late game every single time or something like that. So I am going to say Cloud9 3-2. Going to be action-packed, and we're going to see a lot. This is probably the game where I think we'll see the most interesting pick ban evolution over the best of 5.
Yeah.
I think we might see crazy pick ban in game 1.
I'm in the same boat, just because, like if Cloud9 doesn't change anything, then I would say Afrika, I think, can win, because I think Afrika's preparation going into the best of 5s is really, really good. But because of what I've seen from Reaper, what they showed, last year against WE, what they have shown throughout the split, they have been really good at adapting, at changing, at mixing it up in draft, making it hard for their opponents. And that had been one of the biggest things they've been praised for in NA. And I think that really works against one of the big strengths of Afrika, which is their preparation. So, I'm also going to go Cloud9 3-2. I think it's such a close series though, and like this is my prediction is based on Cloud9 having picks that surprise them. If they just try to do the same thing every game, I think Afrika wins when you play the same game 5 times in a row. I think Cloud9 needs to be able to surprise them, needs to be able to have adaptations.
Yeah, and one of the other things you just reminded me, a lot of people have been saying that these 2 teams scrimmed a lot for group stage, which makes it even more interesting.
And especially you got to rank the C9 reaction video they posted when they drew Afrika,
Well,
and they're all just like, "Oh my god!"
I think Afrika probably
Afrika's
had,
probably having the same
Afrika probably had the
reaction, yeah.
exact same reaction. Like Cloud9, hell yeah,
Yeah.
we're not on the same side as like RNG and KT.
Yeah.
I'm loving
Yeah,
it.
that's-
all
that's
all the
true.
West is cheering, and Afrika is like, "Yeah, we got the West."
So I think both are
Okay.
Actually, everybody on this whole side of the bracket is probably like,
Yeah.
"Yay, we're not on the other side with KT and RNG and everything." But it does also bring into focus, like, since this year we have a lot shorter time between groups and quarters.
Mhm.
Them being scrim partners in groups means even more because now there's only a couple of
Right.
days, right? For them to be like, oh yeah, remember when they were doing X strategy in our scrims before? Now there's a lot less time, so it does make it super interesting and adds another level to the mind games.
All right, Froskurinn.
So
But close.
I'm gonna split the wickets a little bit, and this is so cheating. I think if it goes to 5
You're gonna
games,
say both.
She's gonna give two. She's gonna give two
Oh.
predictions.
I'm gonna get 2 predictions. I think
Yes.
if it goes
You can't
to
be wrong.
goes to 5 games, that's how Cloud9 win. I think if Cloud9 win, it's a 3-2, and I think it's based off of their consistency. I mean, Jet, you brought up a great point about like their Baron setups and their vision control and kind of more of the fundamentals of how to close out games, and that's something that's really concerning. So I think that there are games where Cloud9 will have the crazy pocket picks that they'll just come out swinging and they'll knock Afrika down because Afrika will have or won't have the individual talent to really compete in some of these skirmishes. But I don't think they have the consistency to do that enough to clean it up. I think if Afrika win, it's a 3-1. I think if Afrika download Cloud9 and just have a good read, which between their first round robin and their second round robin, it felt like they had a terrible read on the meta and then they cleaned it up and tightened it immediately, going towards the Nocturne, recognizing how to use that pick. And then I think it's, Cloud9 get one good sucker punch, but otherwise it's Afrika who, while the games will be slow and they'll look really close from a gold perspective, if you're actually looking at what's happening in the pathing, where the vision's going, and how Afrika are creating the windows to play around, that Afrika are still the smarter team in terms of, our champion has this power window, we need to execute it on now, whereas Cloud9 feel more like they're shooting from the hip a little bit, where it's, in that
Urka!
mob moment, it's like, we can do it, go, 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 and you have those miracle moments. So
which is more likely though?
Yeah.
I technically think it's more likely for Afrika because of the scrim partners. Like, if you have this team that is super disciplined, that is really good at downloading, and they already have so much experience with Cloud9, and we saw how well Cloud9 performed at Group B. Well, if they're getting that much good practice to have that type of performance, and we saw what Afrika was able to do, I'm like, it wasn't as fancy or with so much flair, but if you go back and watch Afrika's pathing, how they're controlling their lanes, their individual performance, they also had a massive upgrade from round 1 to round 2 of the groups.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that as well as the more likely to be in Afrika 3-1, even though my pick'ems have C9 going to finals, because I'm going to hedge my bets right here. You pick them, Kobe, you do the same thing. You pick what you want to happen. But on the show, I'm just going to say what I think is going to happen, and it's going to be close. And here's another thing that we haven't...
Picking both sides. We got a couple of cheaters over here, Kobe.
Yeah.
We got 6 predictions here.
I respect your boldness.
Yeah. Well, okay. So one thing that I worry about for C9 is how well they adapt to each stage. So previously, the C9 rookies, Licorice, Blabber, Zazel, felt like they were really good in the NALCS studio. And then when they got on the big stage in Oakland, they struggled. And then they came back here for the gauntlet and they looked like C9 again. And I wonder how much of even going to the group stage in Busan in the first week was nerves, and then a second week they were comfortable. You do move locations once again, and the stage is bigger, so I worry that they might have a slow start. And if they have a slow start against Afrika, I think they're going to have a hard time recovering. And this is just an additional point to all the other things you guys have said. It's not the main point by any means. I think that you're right in your point that it should go a lot of games, but I do think if Afrika wins handily.
So as far as bringing up the difference in Cloud9 results game to game, that is one of the things I'm very worried about, because inherently this style that you're talking about, shooting from the hip, going for, these really early game, win lane, skirmishes here, skirmish there, that is inherently a riskier style, right? So repeatability isn't as easy with that. I don't think it has much to do with, location changes, or pressure changes for the rookies anymore, since it has been Worlds pressure has been on.
Yeah.
And I think I'd actually agree with Reaper when he was like, playing through play-ins was one of the best things that could happen to them because we saw, with the pressure on, they did improve significantly from their play-in performance to their group stage performance. And that's kind of why I feel like the, upward trend of Cloud9 constantly improving this year is going to continue because it has been a trend that has extended far beyond just Worlds, right?
Yeah.
Goddamn 10th place team we have here in the World Quarterfinals. And they've improved their play every single step along that way. They got 0-3'd by Team Liquid in the finals. Still, they perform much better. Talk about the Group B performance on the last day. Like that team doesn't get 3-0'd on the finals. So
yeah,
I think that they have retained their learnings and their improvements, but I do agree it's still risky.
Right. Yes, Zazel?
I'd also say I think the guy that had the most variance was Blabber. He did not perform well in play-ins.
He doesn't even have to play.
And I don't think he's going to play, right? Unless it's going disastrously, I don't think Blabber gets to play because to me, while there certainly has been some pretty high variance, I think the biggest difference was between Blabber's best games and Blabber's worst games, and he does seem like he is being affected by the pressure. When you look at how he played in play-ins compared to his best games on the NALCS stage, compared to at finals, right? It didn't seem like Blabber was able to handle that as well as some of the other rookies on the team, as well as Licorice and Zazel. So I think that he probably will just be removed from the equation unless Cloud9 is getting slammed, because I think Froskurinn, when you take in play-in and everything, has just looked so much better.
Yeah, I want to move on to the other quarterfinal on this side of the bracket. Fnatic versus EDG. We're going to start with Fnatic and then move on to EDG and just quickly hit on what I feel like was a historic group stage performance. 4-0 on the last day, 6-1 overall.
They went 4-0 on the last day last year too, didn't they?
4-1 on the last
day.
Yeah. 2 tiebreaker wins.
Yeah,
because you never loses tiebreakers. But more
we have still never won one. NA has never won a tiebreaker at World.
The most clutch, the least clutch.
Yeah.
Anyways.
That is a true statement, Kobe. But yeah, there was a lot of Fnatic hype coming in. There's a lot of Caps hype coming in. I feel like they over-delivered on most of the things. Specifically, the 2 games they had against IG are really the ones that I count because I do feel like 100 Thieves and G-Rex weren't even close to the rest of that
Super
group.
outclassed.
But as far as just impressions on this Fnatic team, a lot of people ask the question right now, is this the best, I'm going to say, European team ever, which would be best
you
Western team
soften the
ever.
question.
Well, so I do think we probably overdo like West versus East when each region does have their own identity, but it would be best Western team ever as far as the question. We'll get into what they have to do to be considered that, but just what do you think of this Fnatic team right now?
I don't lie. I was supposed to come in and do all of my, after this is done, all of my VOD prep work tonight is to actually just rewatch a bunch of Fnatic games because my gut reaction, and it's hard for me to clarify, like, is this just recency bias? Because this is just like the last group that I watch. But my gut reaction after watching Fnatic is, holy shit, they're the second best team in this tournament. And I actually want them over RNG. Like, I think right now, if Fnatic play how they did on that day against Invictus Gaming and RNG play how they did the most recent time that we saw them. And I was all about like, no one's going to beat RNG in a best of 5. They are the best 5v5 team in the tournament right now. But I don't think RNG, if they face that Fnatic, get to that point at this moment.
I mean, I'd agree with that in the fact that RNG lost to both Cloud9 and Vitality in the final day of group stage, and Fnatic beat IG like twice pretty convincingly. So
yeah,
if they played like they did on the last day of groups, I think Fnatic would win that.
But now it's a question of, has that always just been Fnatic's power level, or is this just now on the day Broxa decided to just take it to them, and in a best of 5 they just start to slow it down? Which I hope they don't. I hope we continue to see Mr. Broxa just slamming kids.
Yeah, Broxa and Lee Sin was one of my favorite parts of group stages. Every single Lee Sin game that he had, actually. And that was the crazy thing. After the first one, I was like, okay, we've had, big individual jungle hard carries at Worlds before. But his consistency with that champion was insane. I do think that this group was the most stratified group. We had 100 Thieves and G-Rex, which everyone predicted as well, coming to the tournament as some of the very weakest teams that are in groups.
Yep.
Versus Fnatic and IG, very clearly the best 2 teams in that group. And it felt like it was a 2-team contest.
Yes.
Fnatic are so
It
much
was a two-team
smarter.
finals.
And
It was a speed run when you're playing against 100 Thieves
Yeah.
and G-Rex.
and it was.
It wasn't
Even
even
though
close in any of
100
those
Thieves
games.
had their own speed run versus G-Rex, and like they
That was a slow.
they take
weren't
they-
those like 40
the
minute
second
games?
game, right?
I think that
Maybe
was
it wasn't
also
even a
long.
They were
speed run.
speed running.
Yeah.
It just wasn't
Okay.
a very good time.
Well,
Matt.
they beat G-Rex.
because they weren't top 10.
Even
Mario
though
Kart, they're going the
100
wrong way on the track. The guys
They're
like,
trying their
"Turn
best,
around."
okay?
If you think about it, everything is a speed run.
Yes,
Exactly.
really.
Just a poor
Great,
time.
great point. Great point, Kobe. Continue.
Anyways, this was basically the 2-team group with beating up on the other teams. And so the real test that we got to see were when they faced each other.
Yeah.
And Fnatic did also win the tiebreaker, which gives more confidence to the pressure situation for them. And Europe has always had great records with tiebreakers. But I am curious to see some of the mistakes that Fnatic made, because they actually crushed this so hard. They probably have the best stats in every role for every player at all stages of the game because of how
Close.
hard they smashed a lot
Yeah.
G-Rex and 100 Thieves. But there still were mistakes. And in a group like this, it does make me wonder, let's say versus 100 Thieves, like the dive Caps made mid on Ryu. Your question is he punished for that versus someone better? Does he even go for that versus someone better?
Yeah, it's
so
hard to know.
You also have to say, like, okay, well, maybe they wouldn't make these mistakes if it wasn't a team that they had already beat handily. But this Fnatic is not without its own possibilities for reaction, right? And I think a lot of those do come with, Caps is a very talented player, and he's very willing to take pretty much all skirmishes and all fights. Rookie dismantled him. They picked counter picks, and that was the one thing IG really had over Fnatic.
Yeah, the surprising fact of group stage is of all mid laners in all of group stage, Caps averaged the worst CSD at 10. It's because Rookie had counterpick on him 3 times, and Rookie is the best mid laner in the tournament, but that's just an interesting fact.
But it's also like weighting individual mistakes versus team mistakes. Because I agree with you that there were mistakes, but when I look at Fnatic, there were mistakes made by individual choices. Caps trying too hard to all-in engage, Caps maybe not losing as gracefully as he should have. Whereas when I look at Fnatic's team play, especially their Baron setups, I'm like, holy shit, they are so much cleaner than Invictus Gaming. There was never going to be a world where IG would win a best of 5 against this team, because Fnatic as a team are actually very intelligent. Now, if they can just rein in some of these individual mistakes where a player's left on their own, they decide to go for like the pop-off play and it bites them in the ass, then I think, boom, you have definitively the strongest Western team that has ever appeared at a world championship.
I mean,
That's kind of the reason why I think they do have a little bit more to prove and to go in this tournament before we say for sure, best Western team of all time.
I just said it.
But again, cautioning, like it's not just like the Caps example. Bwipo can do those things as well, as amazing as he's been. Hillesong as well, can get picked off for sure. But
Hillesong played great.
He definitely did.
Yeah.
I'm prefacing possible ways that they don't, absolutely destroy this tournament. I do think they're definitely favored versus EDG.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think they're for sure favored, and as funny as it sounds, like, so I thought Rookie clearly was the better laner. Yes, he had counter picks, but he got big advantages against Caps, and as funny as it is to say, it actually gave me more confidence that Fnatic can go far in this tournament to see Caps losing lane and they just win anyway. Because at MSI, we watched Fnatic and we're like, yep, Caps is insane. He can play Yasuo and he can pop off and they can beat a team. And that's really great. Like, that is impressive. You see this guy as the individual talent, but you cannot count, like, at the highest level to like win a world finals or whatever off of one dude just popping off every game, because people will build strategies around shutting them down. This was a team that built strategies around shutting them down. They gave counterpick to Rookie every game. Caps got behind every game, and then Fnatic's team play made it not matter. And I was just like, well, damn, they're actually just an insane team now. Like, because if your mid laner can get down 30 CS, who's considered your best player, Rookie gets a 1v2 kill, like, that's insane. And then, well, Fnatic's just going to keep pushing their side lanes. You're going to have Hillesang there nonstop. Brox is going to be there nonstop. Bwipo or Soaz is going to roam down, and they're going to get him back into it. And then it gets to the point where, well, wait a second, Caps has caught up. Now he's doing better than Rookie is in the team fights. And like, if you don't have that one clear target, well, then Fnatic is just an insanely well-rounded team. That is what made me really start thinking, hey, maybe this is the best Western team we've ever seen, because then it wasn't just about, okay, you have to have the one guy have the insane performance to beat these top teams. It's just an outplay as a team. And that, I think, was so impressive and gave me a lot of confidence that they should be heavily favored, I think, in any quarterfinal they could have drawn.
Yeah, and I like that point because I want to think about what Fnatic has gone through to get to this point. And I'm going to reference some stuff that Reckless has said actually in the Euphoria podcast throughout the year. He was talking about in 2017 when they were having that like amazing run before Rift Rivals, and he was like the Kennen split push god or whatever.
Yeah.
He said that it was really stressful to play all of those games that year because the way Fnatic won was, okay, we need to win a 1v1 or win a 2v2, and then we'll get like pressure and we'll get a lead and we'll snowball. And the only way they could do that is if they individually outplayed their opponents. So there was a lot of pressure to do that. And then he talked about how much he liked having Youngbuck here because he said that taught the team how to win without having to outplay your opponent individually. But what I find so interesting about that is the way IG wins is to force you into these individual outplay moments. And I feel like because Fnatic basically spent a year playing that way, they could still do that.
Yeah.
But because they've spent a year trying to play the other way, that's actually how they really beat IG. Like they match the individual skill and then they put in the team play. And I do feel like almost the change in coach this recent might actually benefit them because a lot of teams that were always going to try and win by not outplaying are just never going to practice outplaying and vice versa. And I think we kind of saw both of those things on display in their 2 games against IG. That's all I got. I think it's cool.
Everyone's looking at me.
Also cool. I agree.
I do think Fnatic is an amazingly strong team, but I haven't heard anyone talking about the best West. Like, yes, everyone has the idea that, oh, this might be the best Western team.
Did I stutter?
Okay,
so
right now,
let's compare it to teams that have had better finishes, right? Origin,
So right
and
now,
Fnatic themselves.
I think they are, but they don't get that title until they make finals.
Do you think semifinals isn't enough?
I do not think semifinals is enough.
And I think that's fair
Why?
because otherwise you're just talking about potential.
So-
and we've had lots of teams that have looked good, but if you don't perform, I think you still don't earn the title.
Even Fnatic themselves with Huni and Febiven solo killing Faker at MSI, that team was so good.
They
I
were
feel
good.
like.
So that team, let's cast our mind back to that World Championship in 2015. They did finish first in the group, but they started the group stage 1 and 2 and ended with a record of 4 and 2. It got them the number 1 seed. They then played EDG in the quarterfinals, which they're going to do now. So making it to the semifinals is the same.
Yeah.
They then failed to win a single game in the semifinals against Ku Tigers, who were a Korean team. So if they play Afrika, that counts. If they play Cloud9,
Wait.
if they play Cloud9, that still means they're getting to final.
Cloud9 has a Korean coach, so same thing. One thing I will say that I think is really cool about this team, though, and the fact that they're in the discussion is when you look back to that previous Fnatic team, it was with double imports. 2 Korean players who were, I think, you can argue the other players, but I thought that team was mostly like those were the biggest stars, right? Huni and Rainover were like the bread and butter. They were the guys who everyone was talking about for the most part. Fnatic obviously had great other players, don't get me wrong, but that was what it was about. And I just think it's really cool now that it's an all-European roster that's doing it. And it kind of reminds me of a lot of the LPL success and how like they had moved more away from imports, and there are still some and they are still successful. But I think more regions are finding that, hey, like we actually do have some of the talent. Similarly, Cloud9, yes, there are still imports there, but like they get rid of Impact, they have Licorice. Well, they're in the quarterfinals and Impact's out, right? I think that it's cool to see more teams finding these ways to success from their own talent pool. So really impressive. I
think Broxa right now is better than Rainover was
even at his best.
Even at the peak with Huni.
Broxa's
Fnatic
performance.
did go 18-0. I think that's where you're coming from, right? They had an undefeated year.
Exactly.
LCS split in 20.
Like so you're like, okay, best Western team. What is your closest second then? Have you thought about
Well,
the
I just try to
contenders even?
completely erase 2015 from my mind. It's just like, what year was that? No, watching Broxa, I was talking to Spawn, and he made some really good points. Watching Broxa yesterday, because we use language all the time, and I have this terrible tendency where it's like the language always goes to like extremes because you're trying to like show how much passion you have for someone by like your word choice. And then when a situation occurs where a really big crazy moment happens, and then now suddenly you're out of words
And we're just
to really
excited.
emphasize. Brox's performance on Lee Sin, like future UCals are sitting at home watching that guy pop off, and they will decide, I'm going to be a pro gamer. I'm going to go buy Lee Sin. I'm going to get that skin. I'll see you, Broxa, in X years. Like, that's how good it was. And I don't have any other word in my vocabulary other than like that.
Wow.
Yeah, we made future pro gamers by how good Broxa was. And I just don't think we've ever had a European jungler so far ahead of everyone else.
Small anecdote, I tuned into a couple random jungler streams just since then.
Lee
just
Sin.
while we were off. Every single one of them was playing Lee Sin because of that.
So I have a question for you guys. So I obviously wasn't, casting back in the really old days for League, and I did get a number of tweets referencing Moscow 5, CLG and teams like that from back in the day.
The game was so different.
And I don't have as good of a reference point as you guys would. I had seen some games from them at Worlds, but like it wasn't like I ever watched a full year of them, so I don't have a good comparison point. I'm really curious how you guys feel some of the old legendary teams would kind of stack up. And it has to be compared to their own time.
My argument for Moscow 5 would be that they fundamentally changed the way that people think about the game simply by how they dominated people. And to be fair to 2018 Fnatic, that gets progressively harder to do because more teams have tried different strategies and more things have already been discovered. So it's harder to have breakthrough moments. You can't discover the wheel twice. But Diamond Procs counter jungling and the way that they approach the game actually was like how a lot of people and you talk about future pro players learned how to play the game and take it to the next step. So I think that is also like
I think that's
a
true.
decent one that you have to have the time frame for.
Yeah, I think both CLG and EU and Moscow 5 were like for a time best in world at their specific style, but that was also like 6 months into Korea having a server.
Yep.
Right. So that is what changes the equation a little bit because of what has happened since then, which is 5 straight years of Korean dominance who beat those teams in the beginning of their dominance. Right. So at the time, compared to the world, I think they were better actually than this current 2018 Fnatic, unless this 2018 Fnatic wins worlds, because I think those teams could compete with that level.
I just think that, like, I agree with all these points, but just this idea that we have 2 teams right now, at very least in this tournament, that were designed to lift the Summoners Cup. You have KT and you have RNG, and I think Invictus Gaming would also throw their hat in the ring there. They didn't come here to take second; they came here to take first. And so, yes, that still means that Fnatic have achievements to do, but the fact that in a tournament that has literal super teams with how much esports and League of Legends esports has grown and how many more resources we have, how coaches are used, strategic coaches, on all of the money that powers in, it's a completely different animal. And I understand like Moscow 5, CLG EU, the 2015 Origin and Fnatic, but right now I just think that we talk about like golden eras, and it felt like the golden era for the highest level of League of Legends used to be 2014 LCK. And now I actually think we're starting to see that happen again, where the game has so much versatility just because of the picks. It has so much individual talent because of the caliber of players that we have. And it has so many more resources to now combine all of those elements, where you look at former Samsung White as a lot of people recognize as like the best team in like a moment or a snapshot. And I think that we're actually getting more teams that could start being on that pedestal as like, wow, look at what these teams were able to accomplish. Look at how intelligent they are. Look at how good they are.
The only other small thing I'll add as to why people might be holding off a bit, even though Fnatic right now are playing amazing League of Legends, I feel like you always have to have some result to hang your hat on, because so many amazing teams have choked at international competitions and worlds. And it does feel like one of those situations. We actually talked about this before and had a discussion of if the year is a school year, how much of your grade is worlds worth?
Yeah.
Right?
70%.
A lot.
Worlds
Show
is
or
like-
fail.
Yeah, this is like a pretty much you have to do the final or
It's
that's it.
it's 50,
Like,
it's over 50%.
100 Thieves showed up and like, but our attendance was perfect.
Yeah.
I don't understand how we
I mean,
failed the
Kingzone,
class.
right? Kingzone
Yeah.
was insane last year, but where no one ever really talks about Kingzone
Yeah.
anymore.
They got what? Maybe a C minus?
They didn't do well in the final.
They were
Kurt.
an A+ all the way through the year, but they got an F
Yeah.
at Worlds.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
so that's why I think a lot of people are like super excited for this question.
So you're ready to check the box, but you can't do it yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Which means we need to talk about their opponent.
Exactly. We spent a
EDG.
lot of time on
Yeah.
Fnatic, so we
It's
need to-
warranted. They had a legendary group stage performance,
Yeah.
and we're going to talk about EDG. It's a rematch for 2015, but this is a completely different EDG that we're seeing now, especially if Clear Love doesn't start. Then it would just be Mako who would be returning from that 2005 stint. Frosk, we'll start with you. You cast a lot of EDG games throughout the year. I don't think you were expecting to cast any EDG games at Worlds because they were, what, 5th place coming into the summer playoffs? And
Yeah.
they made it through the regional qualifier?
The spark notes for those who didn't watch LPL is that this is not, I mean, Jet already said it, this is not the same Edward Gaming. They struggled all LPL split long, specifically around their shot calling. Now, I'm going to use a bunch of buzzwords, and people hate it, and I definitely need to redo the language, but we called Edward Gaming a fast tempo mid-game team, which was just our way of saying they love to play the early game. Like the first 15 minutes of Edward Gaming are very fast, very competent, usually pretty clean. And then they pick champions like Kaisa and Varus, and they would tool them to have mid-game power spikes on 2 items completed. And in that pocket, that's when EDG then look for the sucker punch. That's when they group up. That's when they try to hit you. And if you could survive 20, 25 minutes, suddenly Edward Gaming would fall apart to any other LPL team because they couldn't out-team fight individually. And they had really suspect Baron and macro late game shot calling where they would just always set up the Baron incorrectly. You could tell what they wanted to do, but they didn't have the confidence to pull the trigger. So they started putting Clear Love back in the roster to fix that. And I think a lot of those problems still exist. If Edward Gaming have towers to play around and they start the domino effect of the towers, their philosophy is to always make a play at the same time. Like there's always going to be cross map movement. And so they're actually still a really strong 15 or 10 to 15 minute team. So if you see them draft strong laners, you're like, okay, this is probably the best version of Edward Gaming I'm going to get. But consistently, it's just not there. And so I think across the board, like stylistically, individually, Edward Gaming are completely on the back foot. The only advantage that they have is that they're the underdog here. And I don't feel bad as an LPL expert to say that I think that they're very heavy underdogs here. They were never as competent against Invictus Gaming as Fnatic have shown.
Yeah, well, the LPL is the only region to get 3 teams through to the quarterfinals this year with what happened at Gen G, and Edward Gaming is the weakest of those teams. And I will say a few things. They have the lowest gold at 15 of any team in the quarterfinals on average at negative 877.
Not great.
They have gotten first blood in 33% of their games. And I do think that that group was pretty difficult. They were in it with KT Roaster. They actually beat KT Roaster. And if Team Liquid didn't upset them with their last hurrah, we would have seen a KT EDG tiebreaker for first. So they were able to scrap some wins together. But average game time, 35 minutes, actually not that fast because I don't think they're great at closing games. But with all that being said, iBoy can be absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And Scout is still an incredible mid laner.
They're a double-edged sword.
So you never know which EDG you're going to get.
One stat I found really impressive looking through some of our prep talks was the fact that iBoy, not only was he the highest damage per minute at the tournament, he was 100 more than 100 above second place, which was actually reckless. So like that is pretty crazy. Like he was putting out a ton of damage, and I know you want to talk about the context of that. Maybe you're looking kind of doubtful.
Damage.
What-
I've nothing.
okay.
I'm not going to
okay.
say anything about your point. Finish your point. I got my own.
Okay, but iBoy had really impressed me. I mean, he had looked really good on Kaisa, and one of the things that I think, like we have had a lot of guys who look good on Kaisa, but one of the things that had kind of impressed me is even in lane, like we have seen people be able to actually perform and even bully lanes on this champion that people traditionally think of the late game scaling of, okay, you sit back, but then later on you kind of turn online, and he seems to sometimes be able to make these late game carries look really good even early on, and his team fight is certainly super, super strong.
What was the point you thought I was going to say?
Oh, I
About your
just that, like, damage per minute is contextual, right?
Oh.
Like, because I just saw you go like,
you play more.
No.
did the
games.
I'm not
Ooh,
going to
the damage per
nitpick. I'm
minute
not going to
stat.
nitpick you. I was actually going to add on.
okay,
Not only did he have the stats, but he left a very memorable impression on me in the game where he is Zaya. sitting outside of his own base. And he gave an interview afterwards where he said he knew that the Zoe was going to come try and snipe him. But casting that and us knowing that, like seeing the Zoe and knowing that he didn't have vision of it, when he tried to come through with the paddle star and he flashes and cues upwards, like even just that quick little L mouse movement or whatever, really had me getting excited. Like he definitely has good mechanics.
Yeah, that play was crazy. So in the interview, did he say it was for Zoe? Because I know they had vision of the Ezreal ult.
That's what I said on cast.
Yeah.
But apparently he said in the interview afterwards that he knew the little Zoe-like person was going to come try and snipe him, and he was just waiting for it.
It's pretty insane.
That's why. So if it was the Ezreal ult thing, which I was thinking about a little bit more afterwards, I was like, okay, well, if it was that,
you should just
he
move
probably
early.
would have just moved or just dodged.
Yeah.
But he dodges and kills her in the same movement. So, yeah, that was...
I mean, the thing about iBoy is that I know he's getting a ton of praise, and Mako hasn't looked great this tournament. It's probably been one of the worst tournaments for Mako. His Leona game in particular stands out to me. But ultimately, Mako's laned with 3 or 4 different ADCs. The 3 that are popping up are Deft, Zet, and iBoy. And Zet was not a strong ADC. To go from Deft to Zet was a huge downgrade for Edward Gaming. And iBoy played maybe 10 games when he first debuted, and then he immediately went into a final across from Uzi and was able to carry off the LPL trophy in like his first run at it, whereas like Uzi's like sobbing on the other side of the stage, like how could this happen
like,
again?
This is easy.
But when you have someone like Mako, and I know in scrims a lot of players will say laning against Mako and whatever partner he happens to have at the time, you take one side of the matchup and then you scrim them and then you lose. And you're like, okay, maybe I'll just take the other side of the matchup. Maybe that's how it works. And then you take the other side and then you lose, and it starts messing with players because they're like, I just don't understand. It's actually breaking my morale. I don't understand anything about this game. And you start to have that identity crisis. So while iBoy mechanically so sound and Mako has been so suspect, the consistency that this guy has had over his career for a dominant lane phase, I do think that he needs to get a lot of credit for how he has especially trained such a raw ADC to have such a dominant lane phase. Because if EDG don't win that lane phase, they pretty much utterly collapse.
Yeah, and I also would say that in the group stage, Ray had a lot of really big games.
Yeah.
And I felt like didn't have a great regular season. I know we talk about how EDG had an identity crisis throughout the regular season, didn't really know how to win. I think a lot of that was like Ray's transition to being able to be a tank player versus just a carry player and actually like fit a team composition.
Put him in the pasta machine and just like, I don't want spaghetti, I want ravioli now.
Yeah, but with all that, like, if he is able to have the kind of laning performances he had in the group stage, that's going to go a long way in beating Fnatic. Because I think if you look, Scout, iBoy, Ray, at least they have the chance of beating the Fnatic guys in lane, which you can't say about every team who's here in the quarterfinals. Do you guys want to do predictions for Fnatic EDG?
Sure.
I feel like we're all going to say Fnatic is the favorite.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of...
Should I get to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Fnatic 3-0.
That's not shocking. I'm also saying 3-0.
Damn it!
You're like 3-0. Yeah.
Okay.
I give EDG a bit more of a chance than that. I mean, Fnatic, don't get me wrong. I think that they're a really strong team. I think that they look great, but we only saw them really have one challenge in the group, and it was IG, and they did lose a game against IG, and in that game, it did look a little bit ugly. So I do think that Fnatic is certainly not
and you think IG are
unbeatable.
better than Edward Gaming, probably.
Yeah, I think they are.
They should be.
But
I think they are.
I think that it's, I think that I can definitely see EDG picking up a game. Like, I'm going to put it at 3-1. I think Fnatic are heavy favorites, but I don't think they're infallible, and I think there's no team that really is in the tournament right now.
I think the group point is a good one because I feel like every group except for Group D had like a worthy opponent that didn't
There was
make
like 3
quarterfinals.
teams, yeah.
Right? Like Vitality narrowly missed out. Flash Wolves lost out in the tiebreaker. Team Liquid missed out by 1 game. It's like 100 Thieves and G-Rex.
They were never going to beat these
They weren't
teams,
competing.
yeah.
So that just means that there's one other team to truly like track Fnatic's skill against. And if IG actually is like worse than we're giving credit for, then suddenly the Fnatic wins aren't as impressive, which is just a caution I throw out. I'm not saying it is something that is true. So I'm going to go 3-1 because I also think that's more likely than 3-0s just in general to randomly beat a team once.
I mean, of course, there's always going to be a game where someone like flunders a draft and then they get into the game, like they have one win
Yeah.
condition. It goes out in
you
the
go.
first 7 minutes because someone decided to have a bad
Boom,
Did
3
you
1.
say Flandre's a draft or?
Flunders.
I was
Flounders.
like, hey, it's not even here.
Just have to take that one more.
Yeah.
And so that's always a possibility. But like again, I think it's really important to like set the expectations of if Fnatic or if Edward Gaming win a game for me, it's because Fnatic just completely disrespect in a draft. They have very limited win conditions.
Yeah.
That one win condition is shut down, and then from there they just like get outscaled by like an Azir in the mid lane. Like, oh well, we lost this at 7 minutes. Now we have to play to 45.
Really quickly, both these teams have used their substitutes in the tournament. Does Fnatic start Soaz or Bwipo? And does EDG start Clearlove or Haro?
I think they start Soaz. I don't think it matters too much.
I thought Bwipo played really
Yeah.
well, actually.
But I think that they start with Soaz.
Yeah. Okay.
And Whippo better off the bench.
Unless I think the strategy with Bwipo is to prioritize the Aatrox Urgot like they did with the crazy flex picks from Red Side. And I think that I'm not doubting that Soaz couldn't play those champions, but I feel like maybe it's actually a specific strategy with Bwipo because he can maybe play both sides of that matchup and it offers them more flexibility. So I think that's something to watch for. If that seems to be a reoccurring trend, then other teams need to hone in on be like, okay, if Whippo starts, we need to take the Urgot Aatrox matchup much more seriously because now Fnatic can completely deny us without forcing any bans.
And now that we've fully hyped up the West, it's going to be Afrika and EDG in the semifinals.
Back
All right.
to reality.
Yeah,
all right.
Christmas is canceled, everybody. Time to move
Hopefully
on.
not. We're going to move on to the third quarterfinals. This one is going to be RNG G2 as we move our way around the bracket.
Yep.
RNG certainly. Everyone was thinking that they would go 6-0 after the first round robin. Everyone was thinking that this team is looking, like the best or second best team for sure in the tournament. Now you yourself put Fnatic perhaps over them. So, they have shown that they are vulnerable, but is G2 the team to prey on that?
I think if G2 was going to have an advantage, it would be in attacking Let Me in the top side of the map and playing that advantage into a 1-3-1, which they have demonstrated many times they're extremely good at finishing games with. I don't think that is going to give them the overall advantage in the best of 5. I still think RNG are probably favored coming into this, but that would probably be the best route for EDG to attack, I think.
G2 to attack. Yeah.
Excuse me, G2.
I was going to be like, this is Uzi's nightmare. He got Edward Gaming again. He's like, no.
Yeah, I mean, I think RNG is glad they didn't get drawn IG because that was a possibility. I think they're going to be pretty happy with this matchup for G2.
Yeah.
And Deficio mentioned this right after the draw happened. He said for G2 that, like, even though they don't have a great chance, they're actually okay with this one because RNG is a slower team on the spectrum of the teams that we have in the quarterfinals, which means maybe they're going to be able to play defensive bottom side like the same way that they were able to 1-3-1 or 4-1 down everyone else. I don't think it is likely. Have a hypothetical question. Does Hjarnen's Heimerdinger beat Uzi in the 2v2?
I don't think it
I don't think he
beats
gets
Uzi,
it.
but
Yeah.
I actually think he will get it.
Okay.
So the reason why I ranked Fnatic, like from watching Fnatic over RNG, I was like, okay, Fnatic have now shown that they can play late game, they can play early game, and their drafts are really smart. And one of the biggest weaknesses of RNG is actually their drafting phase. Even before you get onto the Rift, sometimes, like majority of LPL teams, they just draft like bananas. Like it's just ridiculous. Either the hubris or bad meta reads or whatever it is, not prioritizing things.
Is the coach a banana doing the drafting like a banana,
Or
or
is
are
he
they
drafting
actually
a banana?
drafting champions that are like banana?
I've never been at cons with them. It's Coach Hart, Coach Hart and Kesman that stands behind them. But I kind of have a feeling in that, I've worked as a drafting coach for teams that if you have someone like Uzi on your roster and he's like, no, I'm playing this, you probably don't get to say, no, play this.
Yeah.
Would be something that I would caution looking at some of those drafts.
So I would say the only way that G2 get Heimerdinger is if Uzi specifically is like, let him have Heimerdinger. I'm doing this specific thing to destroy this Heimerdinger. And that might not work versus Hjarnen
They did
because
with the Zillion pick. They wanted to
Exactly.
see Jensen's Zillion pick, and they just
Yeah.
want to see how it would go.
so that would be the scenario where I would see, a G2 Heimerdinger in action. And I actually want to see that because I want to see what they try. And if no matter who he gets to practice against Heimerdinger or whatever, it's not going to be Hjarnen.
That's the big point, I think.
So, and it's not going to be Heisendong. He's over here. So I don't know if they have some one trick
They have
Chinese
two
Heimerdingers and Challenger.
2 Heimerdinger players in the LPL, and one of them was SMLZ.
Yeah.
So the actual experience that the LPL has with Heimer, very, very low.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so hard is even if you find someone to practice playing Heimerdinger, if they don't play it in the same way and the team doesn't play the same style, it's not the same practice. It's not a one-to-one type thing. And I think that's kind of what happened to Flash Wolves against G2. They're like, oh, I've played more at a bunch. I know how to beat Heimerdinger. Well, this
You
guy's
just donk these
not.
bird things.
Yeah,
They
he's-
die easily, right?
doesn't play it in the same way. And I just think that the point that you had made that, Deficio was talking about, where stylistically this is a good matchup for G2 because they're a team that wants to just play defensively bot lane, play safe lanes. They're not a team that has to win through bot because you're probably not going to be able to do that against Uzi or very unlikely. So it makes a lot of sense, for them to try to play that style. And Heimerdinger is the pick that enables that style best. So I feel like it would be a really big mistake for RNG to ever give it to them because I think, if you give him Heimer, we have seen that he can hold lanes, that he can play defensively, and that gives Wonder the chance to outplay top and make the game about the split push because I really do think that's the way that G2 has a chance to win. I mean, Wonder has been fantastic, certainly arguably the best top laner, out of the West. And if he is able to get a preferential matchup and the rest of the team can hold even, they can maybe do it. But I certainly think you shouldn't allow them those sort of picks.
I think if you're trying to break their mental, you just do it game one. And this
Beat
is
it.
this is one thing that
And then what you going to do now?
it always makes it difficult for me to analyze RNG because I do feel like they are a team that has a switch in some way. They had such a long and exhaustive year, winning spring and summer split, winning Rift Rivals. Basically, their entire roster went to Asia Games when everyone else was on break. And in MSI groups, they had that slow start and then wrecked the bracket stage. And when they're coming into this group against Genji, who they beat in the first round robin, I do genuinely question whether or not they had turned it on for week 2. Or were they just saying, we think we're the best team in this tournament. There's no way we're not getting top 2.
Why would you ever turn a switch like that off?
Listen,
It's so
You're
like
running out of batteries.
I don't even think they turned it on in the first week is what I'm saying. I think they just kind of got the 3 wins and then we're just we're going to really turn it on in bracket stage because it's a month-long tournament.
And you have plenty of proof of RNG actually doing just that. The fact that Uzi takes so many breaks because ultimately the LPL we play more games than anyone else. We play more tournaments than anyone else. It's not just Asia games that they were stepping out of. It's things like Demacia Cup, like NEST. Chinese League of Legends players, they never stop playing the game, and burnout is a very real thing. They also moved into their Beijing arena. All of their families, their girlfriends are all in Shanghai, and so you now not only have a very intense workload, but your break time has been separated from you. So I do think that there was a real case of burnout or exhaustion happening for the RNG guys, especially at the end of even the domestic split. The thing, though, that I want to really caution against, kind of switching back to the matchup, is people keep using this word stylistic mismatch. The 1-3-1, the split push versus the best team fighting team in the world. And don't get me wrong, I also think that RNG have very different looks on international versus domestic. How they play internationally, it seems like everyone just flying Vs behind Uzi or in front of Uzi, and he's just the puck and they put him through. But domestically, RNG play tons of 1-3-1. They're the only LPL team that actually can run a 1-3-1
so much
alongside
Rise.
Invictus Gaming. Tons of Rise. So
Do you have confidence in Let Me for that, though?
if Let Me plays how he did when we most recently saw him, no. But if Let Me plays how he did domestically, absolutely. Let Me was really strong top laner because we have, people like Duke and the Shy and Ray even on an upswing playing in the LPL, and Let Me was just fine against them. He wasn't sacking. He's known to just kind of 50-50 a lane. He'll survive, neutralize, whatever. And his cross-map plays are strong enough to play a 1-3-1. So I do not want fans to think that RNG will just get split push, that if G2 can just get out of lane phase and they get split push, it's done. Because RNG have shown that they have, 20 million games, if you go back and watch the regular split, playing 1-3-1 also.
Well, I would also say that 5v5 team fight with Hard Engage isn't a stylistic mismatch against 1-3-1. They are different styles.
Oh, yeah.
And they can beat them, but a good 5v5 engaged team can actually smash a 1-3-1 team if they execute as well as RNG does.
And one small point I would say is when I talk about the difference in styles and why I think that gives G2 a better chance, it's not that I think the G2 style has an advantage over the RNG style. It's simply that if you are a worse version of RNG playing the exact same style, I think you never win the series. You play the series 20 times, you lose 20 times. I think playing a different style of game gives you more of a chance against Uzi, because otherwise it's just like Hjarnan is not Uzi. If you're both putting everything into those guys, you bet on Uzi every time. Whereas they're playing a different style of play. It's the same reason that I had have more faith against Cloud9 upsetting like an RNG than I would against some of the other teams who play more standard. So not that I give G2 the advantage, more that I give them more of a chance than if they played fully standard.
Kobe, any thoughts on the matchup before we do predictions?
I agree with Azael.
Because
exactly like you're saying, you can't do the exact same thing versus RNG. They have proven over the year and all of the things that they have won that they are the best of this standard style.
Yeah.
And I personally think that style is better than 1-3-1. I think it's more reliable. I think if you're playing the percentages,
Easier.
then I think if you're playing percentages, that is the best style to play, and RNG is the best team at playing that style. That's why I think that they have been the best this year, and why I favor them still in this tournament, even though this world's meta is changing and going more, giving more advantages to the people that are trying to play more 1-3-1 and more early game. I still think that the RNG style is more reliable.
All right. I'm going to say RNG 3-0 because I think that if RNG is really going to gear up with having most likely KT in a week, or if not IG, like they need to turn on that switch now. And I think they will be able to. Would you say this would be the biggest upset if G2 wins of all the quarterfinal matchups?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
All
'Cause
right.
I just said I think RNG strongest team.
I mean, we said that there are no imposters, and I do agree. I definitely think G2 deserve to be here. But then it goes back to that other question of if Vitality was in this group, would this have been Vitality over G2? And that's really interesting because they both come from the same region. So I just think that if you were going to target maybe one spot that you might switch out, I think a lot of people will hone in on Afrika and G2 just because of the competitiveness of Group A versus the other groups.
All right. 3-0 here. Quick.
I'm going to go 3-1 just because I do think that Wonder has played so incredibly that I give them the one game where Wonder pops off, where they can split push it out. I think they have enough talent in the solo lanes, and especially if you guys feel that they get Heimerdinger one game, I think you have a chance to win.
Just
that
a
game.
banana draft.
Yeah, I think that can for sure happen. But I heavily favor RNG.
I think they get one as well. I think they at least get one.
If it's Karsa, then I would say it would be a 3-0. I think if MLXG comes in, then suddenly you're looking at some
I'm
shenanigans.
interested again.
You want to talk about
I
MLXG?
wanted to go a little bit more because it's really funny. What I've seen kind of as the progression of RNG over group stage was that you had to crack through Karsa, and they had to be like, oh, we're starting to lose some games here with
But why is MLXG the dude that you call up?
because that's their only card. That
He's
they
the
have
closer.
That's the only other card they have left to play.
should be the starter because then you just start messing with them mentally. You don't know what's gonna happen. This guy's crazy. He's just flying out of the woodwork.
How
And then
can you know what he's
down there,
going to do if he doesn't know what he's going to do?
You're a little bit too scared to use that card that you only go to MLXD
In desperation.
in your time of desperation. You're like, yes, I'll answer the call.
It's like the popcorn thing that I found so hilarious from Reapered, talking about Blabber. And it kind of applies here too, where he's like, yeah, Blabber's like a popcorn. You don't know which way he's going to pop, right?
You don't expect someone to sit in a bush for 2 minutes just waiting for that perfect gank.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think they only get to MLXG if they win a game versus Karsa.
I think they have to win two games against Karsa.
Yeah, you
He's the
really
final boss.
And then you grab the
gotta
red
make 'em
phone.
desperate.
Yep. You grab the emergency phone.
All right, let's move on
Banana phone.
Let's move on to the last one.
Yeah, dude, KTIG, the final quarterfinal we're going to talk about. We started the episode with this Western celebration about the left side of the bracket. We were happy about that. There's no way KT and IG are happy about this side of the bracket, specifically KT. I can't imagine a harder path for them to get here. I feel like they get the best 2 seed And then if they win, they have to face RNG most likely.
If there's something we've learned over the years, Chat, it's that you need to have your Western celebrations as soon as possible, when you can, while you can. Okay.
But it's also like the difference of like lens. You know what I mean? Western fans, they watch like the draw, and they're like, oh, this is excellent. Our chance of actually getting a Western team in the finals has skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Whereas like LCK fans, you watch a team like KT, and undoubtedly that side of the bracket is like the Olympus side of the bracket. It has so many gods, so many super teams
But if you
stacked in
get
there.
to the finals,
But it's also like you have to go through them anyway. And KT didn't come here just to like, the LCK team made the semifinals this year. They're great. No, they're like, we came here to actually win. So we go through you now, or we go through you later.
yeah, definitely agree. I mean,
There's no way they're happy about the draw, though. Like, they're going to be able to deal with it.
But what are your thoughts on the actual matchup? Because
Yeah,
everyone's
exactly.
This is the matchup that everyone's looking to as like, all right, this is our preview of what's going to be the explosive, super high level games.
Yeah, I mean, listen, IG was a team that before I saw, Fnatic beat them twice in a row, I was thinking this team could be 6-0. Like, they were one game away from ending the group stage 6-0, being the only team that was there. Their individual players are like some of the best in class. I feel like, especially in the mid and the top lane, like they can match or even gain advantages on KT, which I think these are both fast teams that play against each other. So that is a way that IG can generate some wins. I have KT as the favorite, but I see IG as a very scary opponent.
When I saw the IG games at the last day, the biggest takeaway for me was this bottom lane is in deep water.
yeah,
I think that they are a liability as far as just that day of games.
Mhm.
I mean, there was a lot of individual mistakes from Jackie Love in team fights as well as in lane. Baolan as well didn't inspire a lot of confidence. So
Agree.
that's, if I'm KT, I'm thinking we got Def down there. I am, ease of mind.
Mhm.
I feel like in the early game, especially, KT should be able to handle, weather the storm, even if, Ning goes out, flipping coins, trying to invade red buff over and over and looking for every duel he can
Half the
find.
time.
So that last day actually maybe took this down a notch for me and really pushed me to the KT side.
yeah. I think that the solo laners, though, you can come away from those games against Fnatic thinking, damn, they have some sick solo laners.
They've
Which-
got 3 good players. Unfortunately, 2 of them share the same position.
well, yeah, I mean, the Shy, like, even though the Fiora game was pretty one-sided, he still got really big advantages in the side lane. He looked good individually. Obviously, Fiora can't really team fight. And when that Baron got forced, the game was done. Duke was popping off on Aurelia.
Yeah.
Rookie was nuts all 3 games. But yeah, I'm very similarly aligned with, I was so disappointed with Jackie Love and Baolan. There were so many times where Jackie Love, with no vision in the area, is walking the dangerous route and getting picked off because of that, getting spotted walking up to the top lane turret, gets spotted on a ward, they dive him, walking through the river instead of walking behind the turret
Even
mid,
just walking
behind
by Reckless, and Reckless is like,
Yeah.
get back in base.
failing to flash the level 2 Lee Sin gank, and then flashing after the Q has hit you and not after the Lee Sin is already to you. Like, he did so much wrong that I came away from that, though, thinking, okay, that is not like you're not good enough mechanically, because those things were pretty simple. That to me felt like nerfs, or in some ways. Baolan similarly, some of his engages, while like he actually hit the engage, no one was around. I remember one engage where he's flashing over the Raptor pit, and he's
Leona,
like,
yeah.
he's flashing over, and then he's eating, and he's ulting Reckless, and it's like, sweet engage, bro. Your soul laners are like by the dragon and over by the red buff. No one's there. So if the bottom lane, though, can minimize mistakes, the soul laners look so damn good that I think they can challenge KT. But that is maybe a big if, right? It's very easy to say, oh, well, just don't do the bad stuff, and then you only have the good stuff. But Jackie Love and Baolan certainly were concerning. Rookie was incredible. He has the highest CSD of any player in all of Worlds during groups. He was averaging plus 24 at 15. And you do have to take in consideration that they had 2 pretty easy teams comparatively. Like, they super outclassed everyone but Fnatic. So, that does play into it a bit. But I do have hope for their solo laners. I don't have a lot of hope for the bot lane. I think the series is going to come down very heavily to if Jackie Love and Baolan can show up more heavily than they did against Fnatic. Because if they play that same level, I think you get slammed.
I mean, it's kind of good news and bad news. Good news is that Jackie Love's first big exposure to the international
I'm gonna
audience.
go to the restroom real quick. Dracos has set the precedent.
That's
for us
allowed.
to
You could just
on
like
the
pause
tab.
and
Goodbye, Kobe.
I'll miss you.
I've never seen this happen before.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't watch the Euphoria 90-minute collab episode.
Yep.
Only when we have guests does this happen.
What is that?
He's gone.
It's a long podcast, and we
Yeah.
drank a lot of water.
Much
I
like
also have
Jackie
to go to
Love
the washroom.
was.
So he literally just pulled like a wolf. He's like, my chair is uncomfortable. Can I please go? No, what I was going to say is there's two primary problems. Team fighting and then individual decision making. The reason why Invictus Gaming are one of the weakest LPL team fighting teams is because of Ning and Baolan. If you watch them in team fights, their individual mechanics are not consistent. There's way too much variance there. But also their target selection, when they're using their cooldowns, how they're controlling zones. They are simply outclassed by pretty much every other opponent. Ning and Jackie Love both had incredible starts for this tournament, so I feel like people like kind of got their lips wet on Invictus Gaming. They're like, oh, this is an amazing team. This is going to be great. And then reality kind of sunk back in where you start to see more consistent performance. How IG played the back half games against Fnatic last two are much closer to performances from Baolan and Ning that we've seen for the last 10 weeks of LPL domestic.
I think that's interesting because when you say reality for this team, I think there are two realities for this team, not necessarily like one is true versus the other being a mirage, because they absolutely did go 18-1 in both spring and summer split,
Yeah.
right? So like, I think on a day, Ning can flip the coin properly and be amazing, and then on the other day he flips the coin and feeds and has the most deaths of all junglers in the LPL, right? So,
But I don't want to like gamble and bet the house on the.
you don't want to gamble on it, but like I feel like they still have the potential to be great while they also have the potential to be awful.
Yeah.
I just think they have very high variance.
It's also because I agree, those are very good points, and I don't want to downplay Invictus Gaming. I have this terrible tendency. I'm a very critical caster. When I look at IG, I'm like, there are so many problems here. They were never contested on their problems. They never had to learn from their mistakes. Because there's one thing to say like you have an incredible domestic season in LPL, but in the LPL over the course of the years, and not just for 2018, there's just this sixth gear that these repeated teams find and they pop it in and they turn up in playoffs. And because you play so many games in the LPL, and a lot of them, frankly, just don't really matter, unless you show up in playoffs, you don't matter. And Invictus Gaming have been around since 2011. They've only missed playoffs twice, but they've only been to an LPL final twice. The most recent one and one in the very beginning. And so from a much larger timeline, very different rosters, but also kind of like this iteration of the roster most recently, it's like until Jackie Love can actually step up in the spotlight, until Ning has a consistent performance when it counts, they just don't get to be in the conversation like RNG, who are completely dominating it right now. And that's maybe just a very different lens of like LPL, because we watch 20 million games and you just get so much Clockwork Orange. You're just watching Ning like miss Barons and I'm done.
I will say though, like from the outside perspective, so I'm a bit of an IG fanboy because I love the Shy.
Oh, really?
And I watch all his games, and I'm always like, yeah, this is how every top laner should play. But I do think they get a bit of a bad rap because people talk about them like, they're not on that level. But as Jet said, they had an incredible regular season. But they also, I feel like people forget or don't give them credit for the fact that they lost 3-2 to RNG in spring without the Shy playing, who was their best performer in spring. And then even in summer, so the Shy was back, but they only lost 3-2 as well. And you can make the arguments about, okay, well, RNG threw at Baron in game 3, which allowed them to get close. But then IG threw in game 5, which allowed RNG to win. So it's like, I still think like this is a team that was competitive with IG. It's not like they had a great regular season and then got super slammed like Immortal style in playoffs, right? This is a team that
lost to 3 teams the entire year: KT, RNG, and Rogue Wars. Those
Yeah.
are the only 3 teams now Fnatic that Invictus Gaming have lost to.
Exactly. So it's, I do want to give them their due a little bit in the fact that they really did have very close best of 5s against RNG in both spring and summer. They did fall short, and I think that certainly Jackie Love in those pressure situations, Ning is a bit of a coin flipper, and Jackie Love has some very disappointing,
He's got nerves.
high
He looks
pressure
bad in
games.
high pressure.
Yeah, like there's games, I can't even remember exactly what series it was. It might have been the spring RNG one.
It was
where he's playing
spring
Caitlyn, He's
RNG.
like flashing into a turret
And died.
trying to built over Peacemaker someone who he misses, and there's like 3 other people around him. They're like, oh, well, I guess you're dead now. And it was just like, even if it worked, it was terrible. Like, what are you doing? But I do think that they are more competitive than sometimes people are giving them credit for, because people are remembering the losses to RNG, but maybe not remembering how close they were. That being said, I still think KT is favored, but this is a team that, if Jackie Love can have a consistent performance, they could actually win, I think.
There's a history concept called the acts that miss Alexander, and the idea that there's these small instances in history that if things had gone differently, then history would have been dramatically changed. And I feel like the spring semifinal between RNG and Invictus Gaming.
What if the Shy was playing?
That's the thing, though, because you look at the timeline, and if Invictus Gaming have the Shy, who Duke accounted for 80% of IG's losses, that split. The Shy was head and shoulders very easily the better top laner in that game, and they win that semifinal. They go to finals. Let's say they win the cup. Who cares about MSI? Like, it doesn't even matter if Invictus Gaming win MSI. But the thing is that RNG, if Uzi is denied another championship, if he doesn't go to MSI and win that international title and get that experience on Ming, then you suddenly don't have this super power RNG. Because when I look at RNG and how they've leveled up now, I think that, this is confidence. This is finally the mental blocker. And Uzi himself has said in interviews, there's like a haze that falls over me. You watch his reverse sweep against Edward Gaming. It's not Uzi locking in the Kai'Sa or taking the Ezreal, like deciding that he's going to be the carry. It's Uzi taking a step back and saying, I'm going to play Ashe. He eats a Sejuani ult. He messes up his QSS. He just plays, frankly, he played like garbage that game. And it's like the pressure is weighting down on him. You see like these emotional reactions. 2018, Uzi says, come and beat me. Everyone laughs and says, beat you, like everyone's beating you, what are you saying? But he locks in, the Ezreal. He decides that he's going to be the carry, and suddenly he's playing with the confidence of knowing that he can get it done. And if you strip all that away in that single moment,
mental state matters a lot.
That was the battle that decided the war. And I think from that context is really, really interesting of how these different timelines co-sected.
Because then if IG wins that game, does Jackie Love have confidence? Does Ning have consistency? You start asking those questions. And another team that loves what ifs, Kobe, you get to join us for our KT discussion. You don't get to hear IG though.
I disagree with everything Jat said while I was gone.
Yeah.
He said
said
Kobe
you were
was
great.
one of the great junglers, one of his favorite casters.
Really, there was
He's like,
Broxa and
handsome
Kobe.
man.
Who has Western jungle performances.
But very clearly, Kobe disagrees.
Yeah, he disagreed. This does remind me of 2015 KT a little bit. Because 2015 KT, I feel like got hosed in the quarterfinal draw. They had to play the KU Tigers, who ended up going all the way to finals and were 4-2 with the Flash Wolves, but they dropped 2 to the Flash Wolves and didn't get the tiebreaker. And I feel like IG is the strongest Pool 2 seed and has that potential to really go far if they hit the right side of the coin and if they gain that confidence. And KT, I feel like, has the same types of pressure failures in the past. It's just the question of how much confidence did they gain when they won that LCK championship? Because that series against Griffin was insanely close. There were so many things that could have gone the other way in all 5 games to get it to that very end. And yes, they won. So if they play with the full confidence of what we expect KT to be, yes, they're going to be the best. But there's always that question, especially if they start feeling like they're a little bit unlucky with the draw.
A lot of this too, for me, revolves around the mid lane matchup. I don't know if you guys already touched on that, but Rookie versus KT again is kind of, this is the his last team versus the new guy on the block, UCal. There's a lot of pressure on UCal. He's still so young. He's in a rookie position there. And if it starts to turn into Rookie getting counterpick and smashing mid lane, as we saw him do against Fnatic, even though they didn't necessarily win all of those games, Rookie himself had a huge impact. I mean, that can start to weigh more and more on your mind, and especially as a rookie on this stage. KT, this is supposed to be the year for KT.
Yeah.
Score finally got his trophy. We're doing it this year. Like, everybody joined this team to win. I feel like the extra levels of mental pressure, especially for him, are going to be intense.
I think one of the things that I was super, super impressed with KT about is, you talk about the inconsistencies from IG, and this is a team that feels like better than any other team in the tournament. They punish your mistakes, because it always felt like the time from Baron to win was like that. Like if you mess up that team fight and they get the Baron, the game just felt so over so fast, whereas lots of other teams were like, all right, we'll get the first Baron, then we'll get the outers, then we'll get the second Baron, and we'll get the first Hib, then we'll go for the Elder, and then, and then we'll close on the third. They're just like, well, we're just going to win in 3 minutes after you lost that mid lane team fight. And, when you pair that with the fact they actually got the first turret in every single game, like their early game is good, their closing is incredible. Like that was the most impressive part about KT for me, is just it felt like they have this killer instinct and they know exactly how far they can push, when they get in a lead. So I think that it becomes so important to have strong laning performances against them, to never really make that mistake, to never really give them that one fight, because I think KT looked, by far the best at closing games. And, if you end up giving them that advantage, it just felt like, okay, well, the game's done.
Just the versatility of KT. It's the fact that, they could go into this best of 5 and we could have an incredibly bloody, very back and forth, hyper skirmish heavy best of 5 where, like new mechanical ceilings are being set on champions that we weren't even aware existed. Or you could have a very controlled, very suffocating, quick best of 5 where KT are just reading the map, they're playing around their pressure points, they only need to, that 1-2 jab, and it's just looking for that one punch to knock Invictus Gaming out. And I think if it goes into more of kind of this back and forth, very skirmish heavy, then IG have a very heavy chance. But unfortunately, I haven't seen IG be able to play that type of style, and I have seen KT play that type of style. So in terms of holistic win conditions stylistically, you always have to wait KT.
All right, 90 minutes in. Do you got a prediction for the last one?
KT 3-1.
Kobe?
KT 3-0.
Woo!
Oh,
Score and deft way better than their opponents and their.
And he didn't even need to listen to the IG section to get that.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them a game. I'm going to go 3-1 just because I do think that Rookie, Duke, and the Shy have played so well that you can get an advantage off of solo lanes and snowball in one of those games.
IG has only lost best of 5s in the 5th game.
Going
KT
5?
3-2.
Ooh, I like
They
it.
also lost like a 3rd, 4th place match best of 5 faster than that.
Yeah, it
but
was
that
3-1.
one doesn't count.
That was after they were already tilted.
They were
from
already
I was
RNG.
gonna
tilted.
say, I remember
Doesn't
that
count.
Rogue Warriors.
Yeah, that's not the
I
one I was
don't, because I
referencing.
eventually blocked it out. So I was so sad that they lost to RNG again.
You know who was also sad? Rookie was real sad.
Yeah, that's true.
Stat stats are always correct if you don't count the ones
That are incorrect.
And I've decided to omit. Yeah.
If we just move the goalposts enough.
Yeah. We're going to do Twitter real quick before we wrap up. Got a question from Kupi v. Britannia. For the 2nd year in a row, the play-in teams from EU, NA, and China all made it out of groups. Is it once again just luck, or does the play-in stage have some real advantages over going straight to groups?
For me, there's 2 parts to this. I think that the team that wins the gauntlet is very often better than 3rd in their region, because that's like recent performance. It's not relying on spring at all in championship points. It's your current performance going into Worlds. You beat all these other teams. So that generally means maybe you're actually better even than the 2nd seed team. And then I would also say, I personally believe playing through play-in is an advantage. I think that getting the warm-up games, even if you are a super dominant team, I always felt like in my tournament days, I always prayed for easy games at the start because it built confidence. Even if you had the ability to win a whole tournament, getting those easy games under your belt makes you feel good, makes you feel comfortable in that environment. So I do think that helps. And then for the teams that are maybe more unsure, I mean, like Cloud9 got to test out, should we play Blabber or Sven, right? If you play Blabber heavily in groups, maybe he doesn't do well there and you just get knocked out, right? So I think you get to test things out, you get to explore the meta. I think it's an advantage.
I think both of those are correct. And there is also a lot of luck in groups, in your group draw.
Mm-hmm.
The way that Worlds is drawn, I mean, even though it's double round robin, best of 1s, there definitely is luck that goes into getting out of a harder group or getting out of an easy group. But I don't think that overwrites both the points that Izzel just made.
And the risk of being in play-in is real. It's just those 3 teams haven't been punished by it yet. Cloud9 went to a game 5 against Gambit.
Yeah.
If they messed up in that game 5, they don't even make it to groups.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the negative part of going to play-in. But yeah, I really do. I'm going to think a lot about the qualification aspect of it. Like, there are a lot of situations where the team that wins in the regional qualifier is actually like the 2nd best team right now. So I think you could say that this year. Right, for North America at least. I don't know if it's true for Europe between G2 and Vitality. Both those teams actually played great in the group stage, but it's definitely interesting to think about. Any final thoughts for our next Twitter question? Sweet. Please discuss. Well, this is from. We got this question a lot actually. This one is from Victorious VIP. Please discuss the 100 Thieves 80 carry situation. Huge slap in the face for Cody Sun to play all year with the team, only to get benched at Worlds. That's basically it. They're calling it questionable.
I mean, we don't have any further insight than anyone else. We can discuss it.
Yeah.
And yes, it is a huge slap in the face to not get to play any games at Worlds after.
Well, especially every other team after they were eliminated was putting in their sub. Like aside from TL where they brought Viper and no one was expecting to play, like almost every other team, once they were eliminated, they were doing a jungle sub or something to give the guy a game on the world stage. I think that's the part that I think feels bad.
To me, the one thing I can say, I don't have any internal insight. They haven't really been communicating. My immediate assumption when you are losing super hard in the first round of both those teams, you don't even try Cody Sun, just says that the inner workings of the team, they're not happy playing with Cody Sun, or Cody Sun is not happy playing with them. It's, I think, less about game performance and more about, the interactions of the players on the team. That to me just says it's not working. Cody Sun's not going to be there coming into the next year, and that's probably all we're ever going to know.
Yeah, I do want more communication on it. I would understand 100 Thieves. Like, I understand 100 Thieves not wanting to say, we don't like Cody Sun. Like, you don't want to throw a player under the bus if you're not playing him. And maybe 100 Thieves thought that was the only thing that they would do by communicating.
Yeah.
But I feel like if they're creative, there is a way to at least let people know what your intentions are.
Yeah.
Which I think is what feels the worst, is just the total darkness on the situation.
Yeah. It does feel bad. Of course, from their side, they're trying to protect their coaches, their other players, as well as Cody Sun himself. But some sort of communication is definitely would go a long way, I think.
I mean, that's what Prawley said, right? He had the interview quote. I haven't watched the full interview, but it basically says there's no advantage to actually discussing it because it just kind of makes you pick sides.
People do criticize,
but I don't fully agree.
PR statements or whatever from companies and things all the time, but there is a reason that those came to exist. Because even if you're saying something and everyone knows, oh, it's a PR statement, that's a reason it's called a PR statement. Like, it's inoffensive. It is some sort of communication. If there's zero communication, people go digging for their own reasons, and this sorts of stuff.
And then you get a giant disappreciation thread on the front page of Reddit. There's been a lot of discussion on this topic, so I don't think we're necessarily adding too much of it. I think Travis made a good interview that outlined a lot of the stuff. I think 100 Thieves does need to improve their communication as a team, for sure.
I just want to last, because I agree with all of this, and I'm not trying to play 100 Thieves apologist, but I do think that it would be a real shame in the same way that if Cloud9 had lost to Gambit in that best of 5 and never made groups, that it's a shame that then all of their achievements that they made in their entire year, it feels bad that Worlds is the only thing that people pay attention to. 100 Thieves still made a final.
Great content
it's their first year. Their clothing line is pretty sick. They go to Worlds. That's still a lot of accomplishments, and 100% clean up your transparency. But ultimately, there are still things to be good job, good first run.
Yeah, it almost feels like getting to Worlds, limping into Worlds, is worse than not going to Worlds, because then
for your brand.
For your brand, because everyone's going to flame you if you're going to do bad at Worlds, right? Whereas, a team that maybe finished looking stronger and does not go to Worlds, you don't have that opportunity for people to flame you. But I do like your point about the things that they did well, right?
Yeah.
All the things that you mentioned. I think the heist was also one of the more interesting documentary things they did.
I think there are pros and cons of each team every single year, and it's just unfortunate that people are no, let's look at the only last 3 weeks, and that's it.
All right, final question. Paul, Budgie's Smuggler, if SKT had beaten Gen.G back in the Gauntlet and then made the miracle run to Worlds, would they have also been knocked out in the group stage, or was Gen.G just mental boom?
Wait, what's the question?
Basically, replace SKT or put SKT in Gen.G's spot. Do they do any better than 1 and 5? Or do you think it was the fact that Gen.G choked? Did Gen.G choke, or are they bad?
Okay.
I
put Griffin in their spot. I think they definitely do better. SKT, I'm not sold.
Yeah, I'm not sold either. I mean, we talked about this even way back in spring. I just didn't think SKT had a good enough roster to make Worlds, and they didn't. I feel like they actually, where they ended up is probably pretty fair as far as the team's strength. Faker is amazing, but they didn't really have a top lane, this year. I think there was a lot of problems with SKT. I'm kind of more on board with the Griffin hype train because it felt like to me that was nerves, them losing where they did more than actual skill. But who knows?
Yeah, if we talk about teams not being happy about the 3 teams that NA sent to Worlds, I don't think the LCK is happy about the 3 teams the LCK sent to Worlds.
Yeah,
I'm not happy about the 3 teams the LPL sent to Worlds.
Did you want JDG?
Yes.
Yeah, so did I.
Oh.
They were really
as an
exciting.
aside.
Don't get me wrong, like Edward Gaming, they deserve to be here. They pulled it out in the clutch when it counts, which is more than I can say for Invictus Gaming at this point. But like JDG are so exciting to watch. Like that is the Griffin, if you will, of the LPL. So it's just like there's so much hype. People wanted to just see them kind of get that chance to cut their teeth. Whereas it feels like a lot of the LPL fans are just so almost done with Edward Gaming. They're like, oh no, it's EDG again, which is unfair because it is a brand new Edward Gaming roster.
And at the end of the day, the teams that made it to Worlds are the teams that deserve to go to Worlds,
Yeah,
right? People
100%.
talking about Griffin, well, they lost. People talking about
100 Thieves.
JDG, well, they lost. Well, people talking about TSM now in the 100 Thieves situation. 100 Thieves beat them,
Yep.
right? Like there's teams that you have more points for a reason. You went for a reason. You won your games, and they wouldn't be here if they don't deserve to be.
You know what I just realized? Paul made that tweet.
Yeah, he
The
made
writer
the script.
made that tweet and put it in. You're not allowed to do that in the future, Paul.
I
Everyone
think you
go
are
blame-
allowed to do that.
just
Go
did it.
blame Budgie Smuggler on Twitter.
If he has good enough of a question that you're like,
Then
oh
put it in
yeah,
the
that's
show.
a good question.
Then just put it in the show. Don't put it in the rundown.
Just you have access
Why-
into your
why
script to
put
we,
just-
your own
we
Twitter?
also pick our own tweets. You don't
Yeah.
have to use his.
All right. Okay, Froskurinn, thank you for joining us. Any final thoughts?
Oh, damn it. I knew I wanted to say something here and now I've completely forgotten. No, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, awesome. If you think about it, you can always send a tweet out.
I'm sure you would have had something really cool to say, but that was pretty generic.
Oh, yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of The Dive. Thanks again, Froskurinn. Quarterfinals, here are the times. They start this weekend. We got KT Rolster versus Invictus Gaming and RNG versus G2 Esports. The games start at 9 p.m. Pacific time. World's Countdown will be 30 minutes before that at 8:30. And then the next day at the same times is Cloud9 and Fnatic. They're going to be playing Fnatic versus EDG and Cloud9 versus Freak of Freaks. So tune in. It is going to be hype, and I hope for the results that I want.
That's good.